Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Tuesday topic. Today's topic is Just Show Up. Community engagement is the cornerstone in all health professions. A great way to engage with the community is to volunteer. Today we have a panelists of some folks from nursing and health professions and Stephen and Sandra Scheller's 11th Street Family Health Center. So now I'm going to throw it on over to Dr. Helen Teng. Dr. Teng, take it away. Introduce yourself and your panel.
Thank you, Darren. Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us for this Tuesday topic on volunteerism. My name is Helen Teng. I am a assistant clinical professor in undergrad nursing at CNHP. And today I am excited to bring to you and our esteemed panel for a lively discussion on community engagement through volunteerism. Our panelists today include Mr. Reginald Howard, a community engagement specialist, Ms. Lidyvez Sawyer, a director of community health, wellness, and strategic partnership, and Dr. Kimberly McClellan, who was also an assistant clinical professor of undergraduate nursing at CNHP. Dr. McClellan should be joining us shortly. I know that she is jumping from one event over to this one. Throughout our session, please feel free to use the chat to enter any questions you may have. We will reserve all the questions till the very end. And then we will also have time for an open Q&A with our panelists as well. So without further ado, I would like to invite our panelists to start by telling a little bit about themselves and the organization that they volunteer with. And I will ask Ms. Sawyer to start for us.
Thank you, Dr. Teng, for having me. Absolutely. So I will start by saying Lidyvez Sawyer. I'm the Director of Community Health, Wellness, and Strategic Partnerships at the Stephen and Sandra Scheller 11th Street Family Health Services. We are with Drexel University College of Nursing and Health Professions. And in terms of volunteerism, so I don't volunteer at the moment. However, I do work and lead many initiatives and collaborative sessions with volunteers that include community members. They include students from our Drexel University community, as well as other universities. In the past, however, I have volunteered for a copious amount of years in different settings. I have a public health background. I am currently a doctoral candidate. And in my spare time, of course, I lend myself to different events that would, deem itself to serve community service and also our community members as well.
Thank you. Mr. Reginald Howard.
My name is Reggie Howard. I work directly under Lidyvez Sawyer for 11th Street. And I like to think of myself as a man of the people. And what I mean by that is I try to give what I never got. And so whatever capacity that I can give and serve and lend myself to others, I try to be there for them. So again, Lidyvez said a lot about what we do at 11th Street. Well, not even a lot, a short summary of what we do at 11th Street. But outside of it, I try to lend myself to mental health organizations, community events, and just overall, what can I do to serve? And that's literally how I lend and think of myself.
Thank you, Reggie. Dr. Kimberly McClellan.
Hello, everyone. So I'm Kim McClellan. I'm a clinical assistant professor in the College of Nursing and Health Professions. I have the joy of teaching with Dr. Teng in our population health course for undergrad nursing. I'm also a nurse practitioner, both women's health and family, and have worked clinically my entire career in the community. So I've enjoyed the opportunity to volunteer quite a bit in the Philadelphia and Delaware County communities, especially around HIV and around immigrant asylee concerns and issues.
Thank you, Dr. McClellan. And actually, I'll stay with Dr. McClellan if you don't mind. Would you please share with us how you became involved with the organizations that you are involved, that you volunteer with, and what drew you to volunteer with them?
Certainly, yes. So the organization that I have done the majority of my volunteerism with is, but I've had a few, but I'll expand more on AFAHO, which the acronym is African Family Health Organization. So they are a 340B and also a federally funded not-for-profit. They just relocated into the heart of their African community and Haitian community in Southwest Philadelphia. But through the years, I've been working with them for the last 20 years. They've been in every little small space that they could possibly find. And it's very exciting that they're in the largest space. They've been able to acquire the largest space, and hopefully we'll be able to advance some clinical component to a long list of social and educational services they've been providing the African and the Caribbean communities of the greater Philadelphia area. The reason I've had the ability to work with them for so long is one of their first missions was surrounding HIV. And I think it's very interesting that the topic today is called, the title is Just Show Up, because literally that is why I was there. I was an HIV nurse practitioner in the communities of Philadelphia and Delaware County at the time that many asylees and refugees from sub-Saharan Africa and also Haiti were coming into the country for refuge. Lands that they were being persecuted in because they had HIV, and our own political government did not allow people to stay in the country if you tested positive for HIV at that time, unless you had a medical sponsor showing that you would not be a public charge and that you had someone that would allow you to safely be here and not infect others in the country with HIV. So that's how I became involved, and I partnered with many of the mayor's commission at that time in African affairs, and that's really how I started with them.
Oh, thank you for sharing that with us. And I really do believe that is part of volunteerism, is to just show up, and showing up is so important in what we do as volunteers. Mr. Howard, can you please expand on us, share with us a little bit of how you became involved with the organizations that you're involved with, and what drew you to volunteering with them?
I do, not to reiterate it, but I do want to harpen on that just showing up piece, because I think for me, a lot of the times you feel let me speak for myself. I felt incompetent because I didn't have letters after my name. I didn't have all the educational background. I didn't have full context of how to help people or volunteer. And I always go back to my childhood of what did I need, or what was I lacking? And it's like, you just want somebody to just show up and care. And so I think a lot of them times, and how I got into, to answer your question, Dr. Teng, it's just, where can I just be me and be me well at, where people I can provide a service, but by just being me, just being hands on deck, being present, showing empathy, and just being in these spaces to allow myself to be a servant. And I think that is how I got into all the volunteer work that I lend myself to, is to just be present and say, what do you need and how can I support you in this moment?
Thank you. And I think it's so great that you speak on this idea of being hands-on and being present, being kind of the roots of our volunteership as well. Ms. Sawyer, would you like to share your experiences with your previous volunteer endeavors?
Absolutely. Similar to both my colleagues on the panel, I feel like my volunteer experience has been so endured, so long lasting. I can't recall an event in my life where I didn't volunteer. And I think that for most of us, it's the idea of wanting to lend ourselves, as Reginald had mentioned, but I think it's also for some of us, the idea of having to kind of enhance our exposure. It becomes a strategy in social capital. And oftentimes when, even when I work with my students, I advertise it as part of giving, and part of lending yourself as an individual and your expertise, but also learning and exposing yourself to others and leaning towards that social capital so that you can continue to help others. The more that you receive, the more that you can give. And that's how I look at volunteering. So in my past experience, I volunteered in research labs. I volunteered in community settings. I volunteered with predominantly Spanish-speaking populations to navigate their care. And it became something that I was totally driven to and loved and felt passion for, which is then why I decided to go into public health. In general, being able to lend yourself to community, being able to be a liaison between community and the work that we do as well.
So thank you so much. And I think this idea of exposing ourselves to new experiences, to experiences that we otherwise would not have an opportunity to have, is also very important to highlight. And, thinking and also kind of revisiting something that Mr. Howard had said in terms of, our personal experience as being a driver, right, of why we choose to volunteer where. I should have, and I apologize, I should have shared a little bit about my own volunteering experience. So I volunteer with Chinatown Clinic, which is a volunteer ran safety net clinic that serves the undocumented and the uninsured population here in Philadelphia. While we serve primarily Chinese populations, we've also served Indonesians as well as Koreans, and once in a while we'll get Spanish-speaking patient, sometimes French. I've been lucky enough to have at least one student who speaks the language that we need. But and my initial drive to volunteer for Chinatown Clinic is I'm a first generation immigrant, and my family didn't have adequate access to healthcare growing up. I didn't have adequate access to healthcare growing up, and this is my way of giving back to my community. During COVID, during this current pandemic, I also started volunteering for CMAC, which stands for Southeast Asian Mutual Assistance Association Coalition, in their hunger relief program, addressing the social determinants of health, for our population as well. So these are kind of, again, the drive is I want to do something to help ameliorate the conditions that are experienced by our communities, and this idea of, and the reason why I thought of the title Just Show Up is that's literally what I did with CMAC. I kind of showed up, not really knowing what to expect, but being willing to do whatever that needs to be done. And the first day I showed up, we had to, do somewhat manual labor, but then we do it because that's what we're there for. So it's very enriching in so many ways when we can be part of that community and assist in the ways that we can. So in thinking about, your experiences volunteering with the organization that you've worked with, what are some challenges that come to mind?
I would say my experience, and I really appreciate, Dr. Teng, what you have shared, just in terms of your own life experiences and how that lends itself to community. And I will say that it was similar experiences that led me to volunteering and led me to the spaces that I volunteered in. But when I think about my experiences, I would say challenges would be not being able to do enough. You're going to be faced with situations or circumstances where you can only give so much, and the system then, the system notifies you or reaffirms the notion that you can only do what you can do, and you find yourself in situations where it becomes a barrier, and you start learning what these barriers are. And you start overcommitting yourself. So that has been definitely a challenge for me. An experience I can remember is when I used to volunteer for a clinic in the Bronx, and we used to serve individuals that were 4-stage cancer diagnosed, breast and ovarian cancer. And we had a particular situation with a woman who who was recently diagnosed. She wasn't from this country. And we were giving her care, but we exhausted the care that we can give her, and she couldn't afford additional care. And there was absolutely nothing that can be done. And my role was to navigate the patients and teach them about different types of services that we offered. And this patient always comes to mind because I always ask myself, well, what did she ever do? Whatever happened? So the systems were there as, of course, as a barrier where that you had exhausted your options as a volunteer, but also that there was an exhaustion in terms of the services that could be lent to this particular person. And so it becomes a hurtful experience to know that there's only so much that we as individuals and as volunteers that we can do to mitigate, a problem for someone else.
Thank you for sharing that experience with us. That sounds it sounds so difficult, right? When you can do more, you want to do more, but your hands are tied by what's available to you. Dr. McClellan, you're going to chime in as well.
Yes. So I think so as Lidyvez just mentioned, I think it's always challenging to find time to do these very humanistic drives that we have to kind of quench that, to help, right? And that's absolutely true. It's always challenging. I also think that, and this is not something that you always believe is going to occur until it occurs, but many of us who volunteer in the community, right? And whenever you're working in the community, you may find yourself in an advocacy role. You may find yourself in a position where it's not just about helping those you're charged to help or those that you're partnering with. You may need to find a way to broker with individuals that don't share your mission. And I always think that that's one of the most challenging parts of this, not just in a volunteer setting, but in any advocacy role. So do you need to find a way to partner with those maybe in a granting position or a fiduciary position or a legislative position where you're trying to move forward an initiative and they're not on your side? And now here you are, the volunteer, maybe on the outside of an organization, certainly in a helping way, and you've partnered with the community and you've engaged the group that you're volunteering with, but do you need to then go on the outside and somehow win folks over who need to give you the funding or give you the tools to advance the agency that you're working with? And I think it's very hard to work with those who don't share your mission. And how do you partner with them so that you can get the job done? And I think that tends to be very challenging, and sometimes it sneaks up on you.
Mr. Howard, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, and I was sitting back trying to think like what barrier of course I'm sure Lidyvez and my other colleague Kim can attest to. There are probably a bunch of barriers that's run to, but you're trying to find that one that's like, if this one would change, like it would be good. So for me, I think it is, and what I have learned again for myself is understanding a certain language to service and serving someone. And what I mean by that is there are a lot of nonprofits out there or volunteers out there that are attempting to do work to serve the community, but because they lack certain knowledge, resources, they will never get the funding that they could to really make the impact. And so for me, I had to go through a shifting period and still going through where it's like, oh, if I learn how to grant write, then I can be able to provide more. Oh, if I would have learned how to put a proposal together, I could. But why is that a barrier to this nonprofit that literally has a stakeholder in the community and can provide the, services that they need? And so I have been going through a transition period of learning, all right, this is the need, but how do I put the need in its proper terms so that way I can get the resources that will suffice to the need? I hope that making sense, because I'm still trying to process and put it out there. And everything that I'm doing now, it's stripping me of what I thought that I knew. And it was like, oh, I have to learn a whole new language to, if I'm really about service, then I have to learn a whole new language, formula, way of doing things to be able to assist and help the way that I want to.
Yeah, I think you're both speaking to this idea of having to talk the language that we need to talk in order to get the funding that we need, in order to bridge the different understandings from different interested groups to achieve this common goal. And from all of our panelists, I feel, and also like as volunteers, this is like our heart work, right? We are donating our time and resources towards something that's meaningful to us. And being faced with these challenges, what are some of the ways that you try to balance that in your life, like that you practice self-care that allows you to continue to go back despite certain heartaches that we experience in our volunteership?
I'll jump out here and be really quick and said, it's learning how, and I'll attest that to Supervisor Lidyvez, and that's something that we discuss often in our check-ins, is make sure we're prioritizing things in the proper manner, because you can't do everything. I have a bad habit of wanting to do everything, and I think I can do everything, but I'm learning, and I guess that's the young energy in me that I can go here, I can do that, and it's like, you only got one you to go around, and if you burn that one you out, then you're not going to be good for anybody. And so now it's like literally prioritizing, and even prioritizing self-care. So I walk around with my journal, or like after work, I'm going to go to the gym just to have those spaces. Or even sitting here, I have my watch where it's like, all right, every few hours or hour, I think it tells me to just take a minute to breathe and just collect your thoughts, gather yourself. So I try to find those different ways to like put it in one another and slip it in there, because you can look up and boom, you done went 8 hours in the day, you don't know where it went to. So like I've been sitting in this chair for like 4 hours and I didn't even realize it. And it's like, did you even get up and take a break? Did you walk around, stretch yourself, anything? And it's like, I have to be cognitive of that.
No, yeah, thank you for certainly, like, taking care of ourselves is very important, so we can continue to take care of others. Dr. McClellan or Ms. Sawyer, any advice that you may have?
I'm letting you go first this time.
Oh, okay. Thanks. No, I was waiting to hear your advice for me, actually, because that's what I was going to say. Is I think I'll be very honest and open. I think I'm learning this every day myself. And Lidyvez and Dr. Teng, you both mentioned this, is that this is the work we do. Our volunteerism is the work of our heart. And Lidyvez, you mentioned, you feel like you're just never quite doing enough. This is what makes us human. This is what connects us as humans. And there's so many wonderful things out there, but there's also so many heartbreaking things out there. And it's very hard to pull yourself away. And I'm learning every day, and Reginald, you mentioned it, is that if we don't take care of ourselves, we can't take care of anyone else. So I am trying to be much better about, if I don't do it for myself, let me do it for somebody else. And I can't show up every day if I'm not well, I can't nurture another person if I don't nurture myself. And I'm learning it. I've not always done that.
I absolutely appreciate your authentic response. I think it's definitely a sentiment I echo with. And we carve out time to volunteer because it's definitely something that's in our hearts, whether it's, in the academic space, speaking to students and being present, in the community space, lending ourselves and our ears to our patients and residents who may be going through a difficult time. We definitely carve out the time, and as most of us, do the same. But I think that, the idea of, thinking about mental health or self-care is such an evolution, because for most of us, we have learned to put ourselves last and put others first. So I think it's, for me, I'll speak for myself, it's definitely an ongoing evolution that I struggle with. I have echoed this to Reginald during a lot of our meetings. And I think that, you know, we try our best to take care of ourselves in the process. And I call it modeling. If we model self-care, then others will also do the same.
I really appreciate your responses. And for myself, this is also a ever evolving process of learning when to say yes, when to say no, learning how to prioritize, to echo what Reginald said. But also I really, within the 11th Street Family Service Center, it sounds like you guys have a check-in system, which I think is so important to take the opportunity to debrief. You know, at the end of the day, you know, every couple of days. That's the practice that we do at Chinatown Clinic, is at the end of each clinic, we debrief about our day, the good, bad, and the ugly, so that, you know, we can decompress together and also troubleshoot together and feel that collective support in this journey that we're all on together. So I really appreciate that. But certainly learning how to prioritize and learning when to say no so that we can take care of ourselves is a continued challenge, it sounds like, for all of us. And it's not an uncommon challenge for most people. But again, thinking about how can we better take care of ourselves so that we can continue to take care of others is really important. So this is open to the panel. Please share with us what you find most rewarding about your volunteering.
I don't know if Dr. Kim and Lidyvez gonna fight again, so I'll jump in again and say, for me, I think it's food for your soul. Like it's fulfilling work, and I think selfishly that's kind of what we do, because it makes you feel good. Like literally, it's like at the end of the day, if you're tired, it makes you feel like you had a awesome contribution to the world and you made a difference. Even if it was a drop in the bucket, for me, it makes you feel like you did something towards pushing society in a better space. And again, I always look at it as food for the soul, and it's fulfilling, and it makes my heart smile doing the work. So that's, as tired as it is and pulled in many directions as it does, I'll continue to do it and always do it because of how it makes me feel at the end of the day.
Your turn to go first, Lidyvez.
Will do. I'm going to use an adage that I heard a few months ago from someone in leadership who does incredible work. I think it's the idea of giving as long as you have, right? And I would highlight and shout out Dr. Carey. As long as you have the ability to be filled yourself and you have the support system to be filled, you have the ability to give that. And it becomes your responsibility. And I know that's a discussion Dr. Carey and I had, which I hold so dear to my heart, because we don't have these privileges and the ability to have support or receive support or resources to keep it to ourselves. You have to give that away, and you have to find tangible, meaningful ways to give it away. And a lot of my evolution in volunteering has really lent itself to students, especially students who look like me, because I know what it was like when I was a student, and I was trying to pick and choose who my mentors were, or even the idea what mentorship was. So I have the responsibility and the duty to be present, but also to be able to give those tools away, those resources away, so that they can then give it to another student or give it away to other individuals that need it the most. So it's definitely a responsibility. It's what brings joy to my heart. But also, it definitely feels like a duty, because we receive what we have with the sole purpose of giving it away. So I feel privileged to know I'm in a position to give it away and also to be able to receive as well. And that's why I do it.
And just to kind of play off of that idea of giving, is I think, yes, giving is what fuels us and it's what's in our heart. But I also, when I look back on the most meaningful experiences I've had with communities, with patients, with clients, with families, it's always been in an act of volunteerism, because I think there's just something different about coming and giving of yourself when everyone there understands you're volunteering, rather than it's part of your role, right? I think communities know you may be a very giving person, you're providing a very needed service when it's your job to do it. But when you do it and it's not your job, I think that communicates a different spirit. I think you get a connection with other human beings on a different plane. And I have to say, selfishly, my most meaningful experience has been through volunteerism because of that.
Yeah. And I'll piggyback on what you're saying in that what I find most rewarding in volunteering is the relationships I get to build with individuals, with different community members in different capacities. You know, a patient who's similar in age to myself. You know, we've been having this long discussion about lifestyle modifications with his diagnosis of hypertension. And, you know, even if he's not there, he doesn't end up seeing me as a provider that day in the hallway. I ask him, hey, how are you doing? How are things going with the workouts? And he will tell me that he fell off a wagon, and we'll talk about, it's okay, we'll just pick it back up. But having that relationship that I don't feel in some of the other more structured healthcare environments we're able to build and develop. Also because in these volunteer settings, we tend to have more space and time to spend with our clients and our patients too, to really provide that individualized, personalized care that we don't always have an opportunity to do in regular conventional settings. So, you know, I really do value the relationship that we get to build with our community members and the people that we work with. So I do have one last question that I have prepared for us, but maybe it's a good time to open up the panel to questions that any of our attendants or participants may have. Or if there are participants in the audience who themselves have volunteer experiences that they would like to share.
So actually, I'm a nursing student in Drexel, and I do have a question. I think that oftentimes we think of volunteering, it's like you giving your time. And I especially love what Professor McClellan said about in terms of that satisfaction of giving away something and not demanding something back. And I feel that volunteering is like kind of rebelling against society, because now that I'm actually going to be graduating soon and thinking about, like, you know, salary and how much you get paid for your time and how much we think our time is worth. And I think it's just so meaningful to see that society tells us that we deserve this, or like this is the amount that we should deserve for our competence, our profession, where we're at in terms of our professional career. And then you have the idea of volunteering and like altruistic behavior, where it just seems to go against like the idea of like, I just feel like sometimes like as a community and society, there is a lot of selfishness and a lot of like, I am, especially with the American dream of like, I need to improve myself, or I can do anything that I set myself out to. And then you have the idea of basically volunteering and how you're basically giving that time, but then you're also seeing that your time is just as valuable as the person that you serve. And I really like what Mr. Howard is saying as like the service and being a servant, and just really understanding that you have the authority and you have the resources, but you're choosing to give that up and you're choosing to serve with it. So my question is, how has volunteering changed you, and whether it has made you like a better provider and or like just like a better person in general, because I feel like it's not even just providing care to patients, but even just like community, and like how volunteering has actually like shaped your lives and how you approach things.
Was that the end of the question? I wanted to make sure.
Yeah, that was the end of the question.
No, for me, I think excluding money, time, energy, and all of those different things, the one thing, if you can give a person hope, I feel like in something that make them wake up every day and get them inspired to keep going, and to make them feel worthy and needed and a valuable member of society. I just like being able to offer, if they think my time is worth the ability of, oh, you're giving me hope, that's enough for me. Like if I can just offer hope every day to, if it's young kids in the community, if it's men that need support, if it's organization, whatever it may be, if I can continue to offer some form of hope and people have a light at the end of the tunnel or a brighter day that is coming, or whatever cliche saying you need to say in that moment. I just like the feeling and that you offer someone hope and giving them saving grace in this crazy madness of a world that we have sometimes.
I'll just add, I love your insight about this being a rebellion. I mean, let's do that whenever we can, right? So let's rebel against this idea that, what is mine, and I'm not giving anything away. I mean, to Lidyvez's point, it's our responsibility. If it's rebellious thought to say it's our responsibility to share privilege, let's rebel. I think it's wonderful. How else could you show another human being that you care in a more meaningful way? I think it's wonderful. Thank you for your question.
Thank you. I love the insight of the panels and stuff, because coming as a nursing student, the idea of because when they think of a nurse, they're like, oh, you need compassion, you need empathy, but in general, how would you get that, right? And I think that volunteering is such an amazing way to get that, because I'm working with people that are so different from me. I think there's a big talk about cultural competency, or just being aware of other cultures, but if I'm not exposed to that environment, I think that it's really hard. And I felt because I have also volunteered and I went to a third world country, and actually coming out of it has changed my perception. And I actually felt I couldn't think the same way as how I did before, because I felt like I was in a little bubble, and there's a lot of things I felt so privileged, and yet I was so unaware. And I felt like it actually gave me empathy, because when I was surrounded by people who thought the same as me, who looked the same as me, or even have the same resources and same struggles as me, I felt that I had sympathy. But true empathy, being out in the world and seeing people struggle and realizing that, okay, these are struggles that I don't go through and I don't understand, but really being in that kind of context or environment, and it just really changes my perception. That's why I felt it came to a point where I just felt I couldn't go back to who I was before I volunteered, because I realized there's so much more, that there's so much disparity out there, and there's so much that I felt as Dr. Sawyer was saying, in terms of having the resources as a first world country, having the resources and having the ability to advance, and not being able to utilize that, and not being able to share that kind of wealth with others. So thank you, guys.
I appreciate your insight, Carey. Even, as you navigate your role as a student and what that looks like, as you transition into your profession. And I will go back to a comment that Dr. Teng said, and when, speaking to what you enjoy most about volunteering, and you said relationships, and I can't underscore how vital that is, because when we think about what volunteers brings to us and how it changes us, I want to say humility. It keeps me humble, because it's a reciprocal experience. Someone is learning from me, but I'm learning so much from someone else. And it definitely keeps me on my toes, and, allows me to acknowledge that I don't know everything, that someone else may have insight. So to be able to collaborate with different minds across the span, with age, diversity, race, ethnicity, from a very global perspective, it really keeps you, it keeps you humble. And that's how we should be when we walk into any situation.
Thank you so much for your comments. And it is truly also insightful and empowering as well. We do have a question in the chat. It's from Florence, and Florence asks, do you share your volunteer experience in the classroom, and do you have formal mechanisms to encourage volunteerism and service among students?
I could take that first. Yes, I believe we do. I can speak for several courses that I work within. I'm quite frank about the work that I do in the community. Often without boring everyone to death, I have some of my students here actually now. I talk about my personal experiences, talk about the rewards, as we've already discussed, that will come with working in the community as both part of your profession, but also through volunteerism. We also sometimes talk about the negative component of volunteerism as well. So yes, there is inclusion there.
I mean, I do have to say, at least the course that Dr. McClellan and I both teach in population health, our topic lends itself for us to easily talk about volunteerism. And I think depending on, the topic that's being taught in the classroom, it might be more challenging to introduce. But I think our students also like to know who we are outside of the classroom. So sometimes it might be good to kind of share a little bit, like, well, this is what I do on the weekend or on my day when I'm not teaching. And that might also at least, put a little spark, an idea in their head, like, oh, curious, if Dr. So-and-so or Professor so-and-so volunteers at this organization, maybe I'll look into it and see what it means, what it looks like. And we also have another comment from Sarah, who's also a nursing student, and she has been volunteering quite a few years as well, but on the EMS side of the world. She's wondering what the panelists thought are the sharp decline in volunteerism. What the panelists thought on the sharp decline in volunteerism. Specifically, a squad that she had been volunteering with for several years is on the verge of shutting down due to the lack of volunteers. And what do we think is the best way to tackle this issue?
It's a heavy question. I'll try to take a jab at it. I think from Dr. Sawyer, Dr. McClellan, every one of us has probably said the same thing in different ways of it's a personal mission towards us. And so it's fine. The real question is, how do we tap into the hearts of those who really want to do the work already? Because trying to get people who, it's like, it feels like a job to them. This doesn't feel like we're stretched because we want to do so much. So it's like, I'm sure it's tapping into the hearts of other people that know, that really want to do that type of, that don't mind it. It doesn't feel like work. It actually feels like I'm supposed to be here, and finding ways to gather that group and find way where they're residing at, as opposed to trying to force people to volunteer, because then it's going to look forced when they come to do the work. It's like, I'll show up happy, as opposed to, oh no, then it really is just showing up at that point. Like, I'm just here. And it's like, no, I want to just show up, and because I'm needed, or I want to be here, and not because I'm being forced there. Again, that was a jab. I hope that offers some insight.
Thank you for the question. It's definitely a layered question, because I feel it's so individualized, and it layers so many different circumstances that we have experienced just in this past year, from the civil unrest to the COVID-19 pandemic, which we're still very much, living through, and the virtual world that many of us have had to navigate. And I feel, speaking from my own assumption and personal experience, I would say that, it's the retraction that perhaps some of us feel, that the world has become very virtual, and the hands-on experience has now become more or less a barrier to speak to someone, to be able to engage with someone, which is so fulfilling, and to learn from someone using just, our face-to-face interactions almost feels like something from the past for a lot of us as we navigate, challenging times. So whether or not that is impinging on volunteerism and decline, I don't know. I can't say. I haven't read on that, and I haven't done my research. But I will assume that it may serve as a barrier to just have those human interactions with one another. So I definitely would like to hear what my other colleagues have to say about that. It is definitely an interesting thought, for sure.
I'll comment just shortly on some of that as well. As I think, Lidyvez, I think you're absolutely correct. And I also have not read much up on it. I think a lot of us haven't had time, right, to read up. And I don't know if the studies have been done. I think a lot will come out post post-pandemic. I hope that happens soon, right? So I do think also to tag on to our former discussion about just taking care of ourselves. I think there's so much fatigue right now. And for many of us who have been part of the virtual engagement with others, but also through COVID been on site, for other still face-to-face initiatives that in volunteerism, I think we're also tired, we're exhausted, fatigued. I think there's a lot of compassion fatigue right now, which, I'll be upfront, we're all battling that. You can just give so much and then you're tired and you need some respite also. So I'm hoping that this cycles along and people get some rest and we all take care of ourselves and take turns and get back into the field, get back to this face-to-face Lidyvez, as you mentioned, where we feed off of that, and that it will come full circle again. But I think it's a great question, and it concerns me. I'm worried about that whole genuine feeling coming back and everyone getting the rest that they need to come back in full force.
And just to tag on to that, I don't think the decline in volunteerism is going to be forever. I do believe it is to, piggyback on what Dr. McClellan's saying, is that there is a level of compassion fatigue, burnout that we're experiencing as a result of the pandemic in terms of our workforce issues. But we will get new volunteers. It just will take time for that to ramp up and actually replace the people who are taking a rest right now, who might be taking it and not coming back to volunteer. And that's understandable, right? We need to do what we need to do to take care of ourselves. And most likely they will put their energy somewhere else, perhaps maybe not as hands-on based on their experiences. But I do believe that people who have the heart to volunteer, to give, will continue to do so in the capacity that's fitting for them at their life stage and within their capacity at that time. So it is 4:50, so I want to be mindful of our time. I do have one last question for our panelists. What advice would you give to someone who's looking to start volunteering?
I can go. I don't want to butt in on anyone. So I think, and this kind of goes along with the idea of self-care as well, is find your passion, again, just show up. And it may be that you just show up to a few things and then you find your passion in that. And when you're volunteering, when you're providing service, and it's something that truly is in your heart and you're passionate about, it will sustain you. When you're tired and you think you just can't do anymore, that will sustain you. You'll come because this is where your heart is. And it may take a few different trials to find that passion of yours, but once you find it, it will do all of the things we've discussed and sustained you through the harder times as well.
I'm going to echo that, Dr. McClellan, as well. I think a lot of it has to do with definitely finding your passion, but in your purpose, but really just being strategic in your process. What is that you want to gain? And a lot of our self may center itself in that process. And I think that's something that was mentioned during the panel. But being strategic and also having an introspective space to think about why you would like to do this. The self-gain and self-gratification is wonderful, but that's not the purpose, right? That's just the incentive that comes along with volunteering. I think most importantly is, the strategy, the intention, the impact that you would like to make to be able to further the purpose onto someone else. And further the agenda, further the aim, the goal, so that you can make the most impact, even if it's just reaching one individual. So just bearing in mind how we can oftentimes get in the way of the work, and that's not the purpose. The purpose is to be able to, again, throw that pedal in the water and see the rippling effect and make sure that we're part of that rippling effect, but we're not culprit to it. It's not about us. That would be my advice to those who are thinking about volunteering.
For me, it's knowing who you are and discovering who you are. So for me, I try to show up in spaces where I wanted me to be there. So for young men, I try to be there. I'm a first generation American. My family's from a third world country. I support that third world country and volunteer for them. I show up for African American. I'm a big advocate for mental health. I show up in mental health organizations. So it's like I just show up in spaces where I wanted people to show up for me. And that's how I continue to be in these spaces. So that would be my advice to if you're volunteering spaces where you wanted people to show up for you and knowing who you are, you'll show up for them in those different capacities as well.
I think for me is, finding your passion. If you find your passion and it will just flow, you find your passion and you show up, everything just follows. So finding your passion, showing up, and knowing your heart, knowing who you are, because you are not going there to volunteer because of what you are going to gain back. You are volunteering because of what you can give. That's the reason why you go there. So if you have that all together, then you're good to go. So I'm sorry, I have wanted to talk and share all my experiences, but I didn't have my glasses and I was running everywhere. Yeah, because I volunteer with third world countries. I volunteer here with the underserved population, especially the homeless people. And when you sit down and talk with them, when you sit down and let them share what has brought them to be homeless, and they feel good about themselves, you make them feel good about themselves, you talk to them, and then you say, oh, let me do your blood pressure. You're touching them. You're touching them to do their blood pressure. You're touching them to do their blood sugar. They feel good about themselves and they have hope. That's here in the United States. But when you get to third world countries where they have nothing, they don't have medicine, they have nothing. And you coming from here and wanting to take care of them gives them hope. It gives them lots of hope. It gives them aspiration and they appreciate you. And I know when we were talking about what are the obstacles that you have, whenever I go to third world countries in the past, when I come back, I feel sad. I give them medicine, I take care of them, but I don't know what's happening to them when I'm not there. So when the medicine finish, what happens? Am I really helping them? Or am I making their condition worse? Not until when we make partnership. Now we have partnership on ground that takes care of them. We have partnership that we send medicine to them too. And if we are not there, they're still taking care of them. So that's one of the obstacles we had. And with the partnership, it makes our working better and more fulfilling and more rewarding. So, and I also share my volunteering experiences with my students in class because I teach nursing students here at Drexel. So thank you.
Thank you, Omolabaki, for sharing your experience. She's one of our adjuncts for population health, and we're very lucky to have her. And, kind of picking up on what everyone said in terms of finding that passion, and finding where is your heart work, as well as, prioritizing your volunteerism as well, because once we are committed to a organization and giving our time, they're expecting our time to be there. And then when we're not there, no one else is going to pick up the work that they are expecting us to help out with. So, really think about, if you're serious about volunteering, schedule this into your schedule and commit yourself to it. And kind of to answer a question that was posed earlier, what volunteering does for me is that it helps grounds me. It helps me have a purpose, even in my lowest points, knowing that I can just show up and do some good and give a little bit of myself to others helps get me out that door on some days. So with this, I think if no one else have any last advice or comments, we can conclude our Tuesday topics.
I have a quick question. Oh, sorry.
Yes, Carey?
Since I was just seeing how Professor Omolabaki, I was wondering if she will ever come as a guest speaker for a population health class. Just I think the idea of global, especially since she was talking about third world country, I think that's like so important, especially in light of COVID and everything that's going on. I think that's like a great experience to just like think about and share, because I did know that some like students were interested in like, global opportunities and stuff like that. So hope I'm not putting too much pressure, just asking.
Yeah. I'm invited. I'll be there. I'm open. I'm open to coming. Yeah. So just do the invitation, then I'll come.
We'll talk after this session, Omalabaki.
Okay. All right.
We do have a global health section in our class. So certainly the opportunities there. And also, Omalabaki, you also have a global health talk through Drexel. Did that happen already this quarter, or
No.
is it upcoming, or did I miss it?
I didn't get any invitation yet. No.
Oh, okay. But in the past, you've spoken on the topic of global health.
About maybe 4 or 5 years ago. That was the last one.
And perhaps if we can find that recording, actually, I'm happy to share with the class as well.
And one more thing, if people are looking for volunteering experiences, I am with Filicamp, about the organization. Our organization, we're with Filicamp, and we're canvassing Philadelphia, we're vaccinating, and we need volunteers. And like we said, as a volunteer or as a head of a group, you are stretched so thin because you want to give. You want to give of yourself. You are here, you're there. So if people are looking for experiences, labackcare.org, labackcare.org. You can go on our website. We have tons of events coming up. Vaccination, canvassing, talking to people, encouraging people to get the vaccination. So, yeah.
So much. It is 5 o'clock, so I will conclude our session together. Thank you so much for attending our session, and thank you for your questions and your input.
Thank you.
Have a great
Thank
day.
you, everyone.
Thank you for having us. Thank you, Dr. Teng.
Thank you.